So sorry, no slides, and I'd welcome questions on the way through. But I was going to recount three examples of ECI projects. I couldn't say how many I've done, more than a few. The first one that I can remember was in 2013. It was the refurbishment of the plant and food building up on the side of Wairaka, which people call it the old DSIR building. So I should start by saying the project outcome was sensational for the client and for New Zealand Inc. I think there was Minister Joyce at the time gave PFR some money, something like $65 million, which goes nowhere, and they delivered for about 45, I think, was the contract with Arrow, an outstanding result. So it was great, but gee, it was hard work, and it took us 6 years to spend $45 million. So it was protracted. So I look back on that and say, I feel like, gee, I could have done a better job if I knew more at the time. Hindsight's a great thing, but it was a classic case of all the things we've talked about that you don't do. So Arrow was already there when we got there, so we were sort of on this ECI train and forgot to ask the client exactly, so why are you going down this track? And their main drivers were that they thought they were going to be able to stage it if they had a contractor on board, and they would just sit there and price things endlessly for years and years and years and chop it up into little bits so they could get the most out of their budget. And so that sort of fundamentally misunderstood how contractors make money. And that was also, as I said, in that time of escalation in the market where they really wanted to pin a contractor to the 1 foot to the floor and have them on site. So the ECI process was a bit woolly. It's like, assist and provide input and suggestions and buildability, but no real hard deliverables. So Arrow didn't really know exactly what they were meant to deliver up. Because it was long, lots of change in personnel, so I'd sort of characterise Arrow in 2013 as old Arrow. Graham Burkhead was still working there, Julian Huggins, Jeff Vivian, all those guys, and then over time, people move on. So there's a loss of institutional knowledge through the project, and we had that, many situations where the guy building it going, well, whose idea was this? And we go, well, it was yours. Well, not yours, but you, Arrow. This is your idea, and now you're telling us it can't be done. Very frustrating. But we'd have to take some responsibility for that. The client wasn't ready, and the things that they needed to sort out, Arrow just couldn't help them with. Like, they didn't know how they were going to run their business. They didn't know whether they were going to study fish or praying mantises on the top floor, and they spend a year arguing about that. And so what happens is Arrow gets signed up. They've got a monthly fee for ECI. The program prolonged. They start to say, well, you want us to keep these people, so we need more money. Client pays more money. Finally gets around to tendering it. It's too expensive. So we do a whole lot of VM, pay Arrow more money, tender it again. Price goes up after the whole lot of scope out. So just really, really unhappy with that process. And everyone felt bad about it. But in the end, the outcome was great. And I don't know whether I should use this analogy because I've never given birth, but it's like people give birth and it looks like quite hard work and you'd never do it again, and then all of a sudden there you are doing it again. So, projects feel like hard work at the time, and then, there you go doing another project. So it was a good outcome, but sort of broke all the rules that we now understand of the ways that you sort of run an ECI. So fast forward to 2024, we're working on a project with New Zealand Strong. Jimmy Corrick's in the room. So Jimmy, I think is like he's a bit of a unicorn. And a mutual client of ours, I said to him, what's the best ECI process you've ever been involved with? And he said, it's this project with him. And Jimmy was there and he did all this stuff on the weekend, and he came in on Monday and he'd done all this stuff. And I said, did you ask him to do that? No, he just does it. I was like, well, that's great. But you got to find a lot of unicorns if you want to run the whole industry like that, because if you don't write down what you want, then Jimmy might really, really surprise you, or sometimes he might just hear off in a direction that Jimmy thinks is a good idea, and all of a sudden you end up where you end up. So the project we're working on at the moment, it's Hangar 3 at the airport, the big hangar next to the timber hangar. Now, so I don't think I'm telling any stories out of school here, but the client wants, and this is a refurbishment of an old hangar that's falling to bits, and they want to sign up a fixed price lump sum with no variations, and that's a big ask. And so at one stage they kind of thought, well, somehow just by Arrow being in the room, Arrow New Zealand Strong, they were going to somehow come up with a price that was a no variations price, but they weren't the design managers, it's not DNC. So we have designed the process so that we're issuing them detailed design, they price that with their subs, come back to us and say, here are all the things that are missing from this design, so we've had to have a few stabs at things or whatever. We incorporate all that into the design, then we say, right, this is for construction, have another go, and we're not going to give you any more documentation for the whole project. So this is the documentation and that's your price, and there's a clause in the contract that says no variations. This has got the usual bit of wriggle room there, a bit of reasonable contractor, blah, blah, but there's an expectation that no variations. And of course what we do in most projects, time constrained, so you price it on detailed design, and for construction design is never the same as detailed, but for time reasons you award it on detailed, then you issue for construction, then sometime later, maybe 6 months, all the subs have finally got round to working out what's different, and there you've got your post-contract changes. And mostly the industry manages that, and some of it's reasonable and some of it there's a bit of an arm wrestle, but in this situation, we've tried to come up with a process to give NZS a fighting chance of getting a price that's within the budget, not stupidly loaded with risk, but could achieve this nirvana of no variations. And then you've got to condition the client a bit and say, well, it doesn't actually mean no variations, and you can't change your mind about anything, which and there's a few carve-outs and get out of jails, but we haven't done, and that one has. What's happened is at the start we said to the client, don't change your mind, and if your program prolongs, some things that are true now that make this a good idea will not be true. And so what has happened is they've decided, for whatever reason, operational reasons, that the work is not going to happen straight after Hangar 4 is finished. There's going to be a gap, and so some of the reason for having New Zealand Strong in an ECI, Naylor's had a good crack at it as well, and believe me, it was a hard decision, but they got the gig. But both contractors put a proper price on the ECI process, not a by the job price. But some of those things like continuity of personnel, all that sort of stuff that were true if the job had followed, all of a sudden weren't true. But that sometimes that happens. So hopeful that one's going to go well. But we'll have to come back in a year or so's time, and it'll be fine. It'll be fine. Yeah. Yeah, and any questions on any of that? Does that sound familiar? If, any contractors in the room been through ECI process and felt like they're being blamed? The client's not happy. They didn't get what they wanted, and the poor old contractor's sitting there thinking, well, it was never really clear to me what you wanted out of this, or why we were doing this, and I did my best, but it doesn't matter what I seem to do. You're not happy, and that's the situation we're trying to avoid. And sort of running these processes. So it helps if you've got a mature client with a realistic expectation. I mean, one of the things on the plant and food job was the QS did an estimate, and that estimate stood the test of time, and it was the right estimate, and the client thought, well, somehow if we get Arrow and we just think really hard, this price is somehow going to go down on a rising market, and of course it just doesn't. Last one. Building 3, which is at the foundation in Parnell, so it's a 13-storey, what will be a design and build with Icon and Generous, and this is the most sophisticated ECI/DMB process I've found myself in, and this is early contractor engagement, so they're coming on board at concept design. All of the consultant contracts are back-to-back lined up so that when Icon take them on, there's time bars in the construction contract. Those time bars are reflected in the consultant contract. So if Icon have got 10 days to put up their hand for a variation, the consultant's got 9 days to raise an issue, so that they don't end up, in the consultant contracts as drafted. They had 20 days with no time bar. Icon signing a contract with a 10-day strict time bar, and they end up being the meat and the sandwich. So all that thinking's been done up front. Everything's back to back. All the insurance provisions are back to back, we hope. And we had a pretty comprehensive scope. Icon have got a team on it. We haven't asked them for a construction team, because the pre-construction team, completely different skill set often to the construction team. You don't actually want those pre-construction guys post-contract because they keep having bright ideas, and it's like, no, the time's gone, Jimmy. Now we just have to build it. Mature client, sophisticated client knows that it's not feasible to try and tie down a team a year out who might not even be working for that company in a year's time. So been sensible about that. And full transparency around the totality of the cost estimate, so parallel cost estimating on the way through. And then one of the things that clients get upset about is when in an ECI process you get to that point where you price it and there's an ECI fee, so you get paid to price it, and then you come up with a number that's the wrong number, and then you say, that's no, go back, we'll VM it, price it again. They say, we'll need some more money to price it again. And it starts to fit, and then they go, hang on, we could have just taken this out to tender and got it priced for free. So the ECI fee stops at tender. Both parties have got what they think is the right idea about what this job's worth, and so you look the contractor in the eye and say, you're taking it to market because you think you can hit that number. If you think you can't, don't cross your fingers, because if you take it to market and you've got the wrong number, you'll be doing it again, or we're going to take one of those off ramps and go somewhere else. But that's a mature conversation, because we've shared the budget, shared measures, all that sort of stuff, and you get to that point where no one should be doing that about how the market's going to respond. So that's it. One learning experience 12 years ago when I was much younger and more naive, and two that are yet to be tested. I'll come back in a year or two and tell you how we got on.
Awesome. Hey, folks, I'm sure there's some other perspectives in the room. Are there any subcontractors? Yes. Is there anything you guys would add from a subcontractor's perspective?
Hi, Gavin from White Aluminium. So we facade and have been involved, I guess, in a few ECIs. Probably more of a question. We find it's quite interesting through that ECI design phase who kind of sits in the leader's chair, and sometimes we sort of see that it might sort of still be the architect, sometimes it's the client PM, and sometimes it's the main contractor. So I guess it goes a little bit to the question around the main contractor's role. But from your experience, how do you think that team coming together works best?
Golden question.
We, TSA anyway, have stepped into that space of early subcontractor procurement, which is a flavour of ECI, and I think probably with you, with Whites. So it sort of depends at what point we engage. Where the PM sort of carries this badge of design manager, but we're not really technical design managers usually. We are looking after scope and budget and program and maybe a procurement approach that requires certain outputs at certain times. But that whole facade space is complicated, and lots of fingers in the pie, and a bit of a changing scene around who's issuing producer statements now. I mean, now council's looking for a kind of a complete closed loop around, like a building like B3. They want a PS1 for the whole thing, above ground and below ground. There's 2-level basement, and so you got that facade engineer who might classically have been issuing a PS2, and you guys are issuing a PS1, but you're now just one of a bunch of PS1s. So the roofs come into it, the in-ground waterproofing, the performance of the below ground floors, all that stuff. I don't know whether I've answered your question, other than it's a complicated arrangement. I think we understand it reasonably well, but I'm not sure everyone does. And we did an early contractor procurement with these guys on Hotel 4, which the airport, which you did a fantastic job on. It's not finished yet because of COVID, but I think we led you into a place where it dawned on you what you were taking on at the point where it was a bit too late, and you just had to execute.
might be the wrong answer. I think it depends a lot on what your intended contractual arrangement is for the construction phase. Because if it's going to be, if you're going to novate your design team, or if it's a design build contract that you're ultimately going to be signing up, then the structure of your team and who takes the chair role, I guess, and your design team is going to be influenced by that. In saying that, this comes back to how effectively you can create a fully integrated team, right? Because in an ideal, in utopia, everyone is on board for what is best for project, and there shouldn't be, usually when people have a different idea about what is best for project, there are agendas sneaking in, right? Someone's concerned they're going to be asked to do something without being paid, so they don't want to go down that path. So it's a complicated question, and something we're going to have to engage in, because I think if we are going to get better at this ECI thing, we're going to need to be doing more engaging with the sub-trades. So, yeah.
I'm just, Gavin, was your question around who should lead the ECI process in its entirety?
No, more that design stage.
Okay.
Cool. Okay, I'm hearing a lot of empathy for architects. Glad to hear that. Have we got any burning questions? Because I'm at risk of using up any of my contingency from this minute onwards. That's not a threat, by the way. You're allowed to have a question. Yeah?
So my question is, based on your experience of being involved in a lot of ECI projects, do you see BIM as an enabler to ECI in any way, or is it just an additional piece of work which leads no additional value? And with AI being more and more accessible, how do you see the role of AI to sort of improve the whole ECI implementation process in future?
Okay. I'm going to tackle BIM first. AI can come second, if I can even have a good go at it. BIM, absolutely. So there's a lot of technologies now, I think I said before, that have to be part of executing successful ECI or successful projects. Go back to Donna's graph. I forget the actual name of it, but that's it. There we go. Like that couldn't be any more true. If more people are involved, spending more time there, and using BIM and technology, you're gonna, that curve is going to go down, and not the other way for the client. So it's absolutely a tool that we still need to keep working with, keep investing in, and keep giving the opportunity to use. So, yep, absolutely. AI, well, it generated quite a nice picture for me, I thought. So I am a believer that so I'm a believer that it will have a role. I probably can't even answer that question yet of how it's going to be used, but maybe somebody else. Oh, measuring.
Oh, yeah, definitely. BIM measuring for sure. Just kick that one off. What I was saying with AI, I was just thinking about a lot of the accountability and recording. What I was talking about earlier about scope and this advice hasn't been taken on, and keeping a record of everything. I think AI in the very short term will be a big role in that, actually, in the note taking, so to speak, minute keeping, become much less of a drag than I think it is at the moment. Yeah.
So we haven't had a good court case about what the AI notes said versus what the transcript actually said. So we'll find out. But we're certainly doing a lot of AI stuff at the moment, experimenting with comparing AI summaries out of meetings. We spend a lot of time getting groups of people together to talk about stuff, and then we're meant to write, capture everything that was said and who's doing what, and distribute that within seconds of the meeting being over. And AI can do that, and we're getting at about an 80%, 90% hit rate of. So you say, well, as a set of notes, 1 minute after the meeting, that's 90% right, better than a 100% right 2 days later when everyone's moved on. With AI, I'm told in Revisto you can put an AI engine over it and it will look at who's generating all the clashes out of the consultant team, probably only useful on big projects where there's lots of clashes, and how fast they're being cleared, and it'll make predictions about whether you're going to have a fully coordinated design at the end of detailed design based on progress to date. So there would be, I think the answer is some days I feel like I'll be out of a job pretty soon, or I'll just be doing some different job. But yeah, it's surprising what it can do.
Yeah, certainly QS is at the top of the most affected curve, so it's going to be really interesting to watch that space.